Alright guys, so the 2022 World Cup is taking place in Qatar at the end of this year, but I'm already looking forward to the 2026 World Cup because it's going to be an absolute disaster. It's going to be a catastrophe, and you're going to find out in a few minutes why this is. Now, this is going to be the first World Cup that's going to have 3 host countries: Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Now, the reason for this is because the tournament is going to be expanded from 32 teams to 48. Now, this seems pretty exciting for some people. A bigger tournament, more matches, but the format is going to be changed because of this. Now, we're going to look at the format they chose, but they were looking at a few different scenarios. Initially, they were looking at expanding to 40 teams, 8 groups of 5 or 10 groups of 4. They scrapped that because they wanted 8 more teams, so they came up with the idea of a 48 team tournament. Now, initially, the FIFA were pushing this idea of having an opening 32 team playoff round. Now, in this format, you're going to have 16 seeded teams automatically qualifying for the main tournament, and then the bottom 32 teams will have an initial playoff round where the 16 winners would join the 16 seeded teams in a tournament proper. But the losing 16 sides in this playoff round will be eliminated after just one game. And the idea of 16 teams having just one game in a tournament really didn't sit well with anybody, and FIFA decided to scrap that, and instead they went for this format: 48 teams, 16 groups of 3 teams, 80 matches in total. Now, this means that each team will be guaranteed 2 matches. Obviously, that's better than, being guaranteed just one game, but we're going to see why groups of 3 is going to be wide open to collusion. It's a disastrous format, and I just want to show you this here, the link here to the FIFA website announcing this format. This is what you get. Oops, we're sorry, this page cannot be found. And you see the player there from Spain with his hands covering his face, and I think this sums it up nicely. This format is gonna be an absolute catastrophe. And here we have the criticism piece here. It's been criticized for increasing the risk of collusion between teams. And this has happened in previous World Cups where the format was actually much better. The 1982 disgrace of Gijón. I plan to do a video about this at a later stage. Now, FIFA's Chief Technical Officer Van Basten came up with kind of a half-assed solution where draws will be prevented by having penalty shootouts. So Van Basten, who is a former player from the Netherlands, played for Ajax and AC Milan, he reckons that draws will reduce the possibility of collusion. Now, it will reduce it a little bit, but collusion is still possible if you eliminate draws. There's a link to a paper here, which I'm going to look at. This is a really great paper written by Julien Guyon. I probably didn't pronounce that right. The paper is titled "Risk of Collusion: Will Groups of 3 Ruin the FIFA World Cup?" You can go through this yourself. I will link it in the description. In the introduction, he talks about various match fixing that happened before. West Germany and Austria. This is the aforementioned disgrace of Gijón that happened in 1982. And then you had in 2018, Denmark and France colluded. Japan and Poland colluded. World Cup qualifying game, Peru and Colombia colluded. Euro 2004, Denmark and Sweden colluded. And this was in formats that was actually less susceptible to collusion. So even with the old formats, collusion can happen. But this format here, 3 teams in a group with just 3 matches in the group. Now, this is the schedule. You're going to have match 1, A against B. Match 2, A against C. Match 3, B against C. So what this means is that Team A plays in match 1 and 2. And then the final match, they have to sit and watch B playing C. And what this means is that it's set up so that B and C could possibly collude to knock out Team A. And there's 6 possible scenarios after the first 2 games. So Team A is playing the first 2 matches. Now, I've highlighted these 6 possibilities, and in green, these are scenarios where B and C cannot collude, and in the scenarios I've highlighted in red, these are scenarios where B and C could collude. So Team A has 2 wins. In this case, Team A is already qualified. They have 6 points. B and C can't do anything to eliminate them. And the same if Team A has 1 win and 1 draw. B and C cannot collude. And at the bottom here, Team A has 2 losses. Well, that means that they're automatically eliminated. So let's look at the scenarios here in red. Team A has 1 win and 1 loss. In this scenario, B and C might be able to collude. And if Team A has 2 draws, then B and C could also collude. And if Team A has 1 draw and 1 loss, it means B and C could also collude. So out of the 6 possibilities, 3 out of the 6, so half these scenarios, possible scenarios, you could have collusion between B and C. Now this paper goes through a lot of mathematics and different formulas and stuff, and it even goes through like probabilities with teams depending on their strength. So you're going to have strong teams and weak teams in the group and so on. And he even covers the scenario of impact of forbidding draws. So this is the Markov van Basten scenario, and he points out that even with eliminating draws, you could have collusion. So I'm going to just show you some examples that I made up myself. So I created this fictional group. Okay, so here is a fictional group I made up featuring Brazil, the Netherlands, and Japan. So let's see what happens. Brazil, they are Team A, so they play in the first 2 matches. So in the first match, they beat the Netherlands 1-0. And in the second match, Japan beats Brazil 2-0. So don't pay too much attention to the quality of these sides of what the teams are. Just pay attention to the results, because some of you will be saying, oh, well, Japan, it's unrealistic that they could beat Brazil. But hey, you never know. Brazil could have infighting between the white players and the black players. Maybe they came down with a certain virus. Who the hell knows? And so just play with this for a minute. So Japan, after the first 2 games, they're on top with 3 points. Their goal difference is +2. Brazil, they've played both their games. They're on 3 points. Their goal difference is -1. So this is not going to change after the 3rd game. Now the Netherlands, they lost against Brazil 1-0. They're on 0 points with -1 goal difference. So the top 2 qualify, and then the bottom team is eliminated. So right now the Netherlands look like they're going to be eliminated. They need to win their last game against Japan. Netherlands, they're a much better side than Japan on paper. Maybe they decide, well, you know what, we want to top the group and we could beat Japan. Japan, maybe they had taken a lot out of themselves by beating Brazil. So the Netherlands decide, we're going to go for this. And in this scenario here, the Netherlands have a big win against Japan, 4-0. And look what that does to the table. The Netherlands jump from 3rd to 1st. They're on 3 points, +3 goal difference. Brazil, again, they don't change. But Japan, because they get hammered by the Netherlands, their goal difference suffers badly. They're on -2 now. And they're dropping to the bottom of the table, and they're eliminated. So in this scenario, Japan and the Netherlands, they don't collude. The Netherlands were confident that they will hammer Japan. They do that. But what if the Netherlands decide, well, you know what, Japan, we just saw them beat Brazil. They may get a draw against us. They may even beat us and knock us out. But we could beat them like we just saw and knock them out. So what if Japan and the Netherlands had a chat together and had a look at the various scenarios? Because is there a way that they could knock out Brazil? And the answer is yes. Let's have a look at this scenario here. In this scenario, the Netherlands beat Japan 1-0. And what does that do to the table? Well, the Netherlands jump ahead of Brazil. So the Netherlands are on 3 points. Japan and Brazil are also on 3. But look at the goal difference. Japan is +1. The Netherlands is 0. Brazil is -1. And what that means is that Brazil are eliminated. So in this scenario, Japan and the Netherlands could collude so that the Netherlands get a 1-0 victory. So the Netherlands beat Japan, they jump above Brazil, and Japan, they still top the group. So this will suit Japan very nicely that they lose this game, but they still qualify, and not only that, they top the group. Now, what if the Netherlands said to Japan, well, you know what, we're theoretically a much better side than you. We could beat you, 4-0 like we saw and knock you out. And Japan says, well, okay, well, that's a fair point. What could we do here? Well, in this next scenario, the Netherlands beat Japan 2-0. So what does that do to the table? In this scenario, the Netherlands will top the table on 3 points. But Japan will still finish in the top 2. They move down to second. And Brazil, they are eliminated. So in this scenario, the Netherlands, they top the group. Japan are second. So as we can see here in this scenario, the Netherlands and Japan could not only collude to knock Brazil out, they could collude to decide which of these two teams will top the group. In this scenario, Japan tops the group with a 1-0 Netherlands win, and with a 2-0 Netherlands win, the Netherlands top the group and Japan are second. So they have many options in this scenario. Let's go back here. Japan against the Netherlands. They can decide that the Netherlands win 1-0 or 2-0. Either way, they can collude to knock Brazil out. And they can decide not only to knock Brazil out, but they can choose which team actually tops the group. So in this scenario we just looked at, there are no draws. So Van Basten's concern about draws is not a factor here. There was no need for penalties. These games ended with teams winning. I'm going to look at what Van Basten was concerned about with drawn games. In this scenario here, Brazil draw 1-1 with the Netherlands. And then in the second game, Brazil draws 0-0 with Japan. So let's look at the group standings. Brazil are on top with 2 points. The Netherlands and Japan are on 1 point. Now I've added another column here, goals scored, because this is what's going to decide the standings. Goal difference is going to be dead even here. They're all on 0 because of the draws. So right now, Japan are bottom because the Netherlands scored a goal, Japan didn't. So for that reason, the Netherlands are ahead of Japan. So what could these teams do in the last game to collude? Well, the Netherlands and Japan, all they would need to do is have a high scoring draw. So let's have a look here. Japan and the Netherlands get a 2-2 draw. Now look what happens to the table. The Netherlands now are on top. Japan are second and Brazil are third and eliminated. So the Netherlands have scored 3 goals in their 2 games. Japan have scored 2 and Brazil has scored 1. They're all dead even on points. 2 draws each. And because of all the draws, the goal difference is 0. So in this scenario, the Netherlands will qualify in first place. Japan are second. So all these 2 teams need to do, Japan and the Netherlands, is a high scoring draw. This will put them ahead of Brazil on goals scored. So it could be 2-2, 4-2, 10-2, 15-2, whatever. It doesn't matter. Both teams will qualify. And in this scenario, we can see like the Netherlands, they're a stronger team than Japan. So the Netherlands could say to Japan, well, you know what? Chances are if we didn't collude, we would beat you guys and knock you out. And Japan are like, well, if we both draw, then we'll both go through. And there's always the chance that we could beat you guys. And the Netherlands are like, well, okay, fair enough. Because a 2-2 draw here for the Netherlands is as good as a 10-0 win. Because the Netherlands topped the group with a high scoring draw. And Japan, they're happy to take a draw against the Netherlands. And they're through to the last 32 stage. And they knocked the mighty Brazil out. This whole 3 team groups is a disaster, guys. It's going to lead to massive collusion. And this guy's paper goes through the scenarios where it could happen. And he goes into even more detail about if you implemented Van Basten's idea of eliminating draws. And I just showed you that eliminating draws is not going to help. Because in this scenario, the Netherlands and Japan, the Netherlands can win 1-0 or 2-0 and Brazil are out. So, and again, like I was saying at the start, you might say Japan beating Brazil is unlikely. I mean, you could swap these teams around, the Netherlands and Japan. So it's highly possible Brazil could beat Japan 1-0, and then the Netherlands could beat Brazil 2-0. That's very possible. And like I said, you could change these teams around to whatever teams are in the World Cup. And they'll probably have seeded teams. They're probably going to divide it up into 16 seeds and then 16 middle teams and then 16 weak teams. But whatever way it works out, there's a huge possibility of collusion. And it's going to be a disaster, guys. This format, 48 teams, 16 groups of 3. There we go. I think this page just sums it up. Okay, guys, so if you don't want the 2026 World Cup to be a complete disaster, share this video, spread the word. Maybe FIFA will catch wind of this and change their minds and come up with a better format. So until next time, bye for now.